Jordan Peterson is back. And I'm back again with another Jordan Peterson comeback compilation for you. Please click like and subscribe below, and then we're gonna get going on this right away. Let's do this.
Why does Rubin spend most of his time platforming pseudo-intellectuals and racists?
I was attempting to understand the underlying structure of belief systems and to determine what psychological role they played. I was interested in the degree to which people adhere to their belief systems. Lots of conflicts are over not so much economics, as the economists claim, and the Marxists, but over values.
So what I think he's referencing here is his first book called Maps of Meaning, which I'd highly recommend. It's such a good book. It's crazy. The ideas are mind-blowing. The writing is okay. You'll have to decide for yourself.
Values play a very important role in the psychological ecosystem. As beings, we have this mythological idea, essentially. It's not rational precisely. It's more like an axiomatic assumption. We have an articulated viewpoint, and it's encapsulated in a dream, personally and culturally. I think of it this way, as there's a domain that you could consider known, explored, and that domain technically is where, when you do something, you get the outcome you want. It's practical knowledge, right? We have one part of our nervous system, so to speak, that deals with the realm of the known, and the other part of our nervous system deals with the unknown. I was trying to find out if there was something at the base of Western culture that might be considered more than mere opinion, more than mere rational opinion.
Why does Rubin spend most of his time platforming pseudo-intellectuals and racists? So that's Chris Hudson putting it out there, but I would suspect...
I don't know, I mean, you can yell out a name if you want, you know.
Well, here, you know what, I think what he may be talking about, and I don't know that he fits into either of these categories, but one of the controversial people you've had on recently is Jordan Peterson.
Sure.
How many people out there are you, like, do you like Jordan Peterson? And I guess, do you like that because he's standing up to political correctness or his specific insights? Okay, his insights. So,
I'm glad you asked that. Well, okay. I would say this. You know, I've gotten to know Jordan Peterson quite well, and you know, he's been on the show a bunch. We've traveled together. We've done live events together.
You share pronouns together.
We share pronouns, all of that stuff. He's a wonderful woman, and. I really look, this guy, well, first off, I'm pretty sure, I don't know who the Twitter person was referencing. I don't know that they would say that Jordan's a pseudo-intellectual, or certainly not a racist.
No.
Jordan, the reason he's caught fire, the reason you guys like him, I think is twofold, and it's the same reasons I like him. Number one, he's just saying be responsible for your life, number one. He's just saying clean your room. He's saying take care of your stuff first, and then go fix society. It's so simple, but it's important to be said. But number two, he, I think, is the best academic at really unpacking what the left has become, what this postmodern cultural Marxist collectivist set of ideas has become. The reason the reaction to him is so insane, and if you noticed in the last couple of weeks, the amount of hit pieces on him were crazy, from The Guardian to Vice, and there were just a slew of them, is because they don't know how to deal with ideas anymore. So now a guy who's been doing clinical psychology 30 years, who is extremely well-read, who can drop Dostoevsky like that, comes in, starts telling them the truth, but they don't even know how to deal with the truth. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, that watch his interview with Kathy Newman, and it's a, yeah, I think some of you guys saw it.
This one's the perfect gift for the friend who's been getting a little too comfortable during quarantine, maybe your son, a father, or your boyfriend.
So just for people that know nothing about you, what would be the first way? Do we want to just talk about your academic work, or is there anything about your history, childhood, that you think sets you up to end up, you know, sitting right here?
No, I think in large part it's my academic work. I wouldn't say it's the mainstream academic work I do, though. I mean, I've done a lot of academic publishing in scientific journals in the field of personality and abnormal psychology. That's pretty normal science, to borrow a phrase from Thomas Kuhn. It's incremental and progressive. I've worked with my students on delineating the structure of personality at a more fine-grained level. But I wrote a book and published it in 1999 that I worked on for about 15 years, for about 2 hours or 3 hours a day.
Did I call it?
And I was attempting to understand the underlying structure of belief systems and to determine what psychological role they played, because I was interested in the degree to which people adhere to their belief systems. And there has to be a psychological reason for that. Lots of conflicts are over not so much economics, as the economists claim, and the Marxists, but over values. And values play a very important role in the psychological ecosystem, a determining role, which was something I was trying to discuss with Sam Harris. But it's a very difficult discussion.
Yeah.
But so in that book, I analyzed belief systems like Marxism and like Western capitalist democracy, associated, say, with Christianity, and then tried to go underneath that to look at what you might describe as the mythological substructure. For me, this is how we are in the world. We have an articulated viewpoint, and it's encapsulated in a dream, personally and culturally.
So basically, we're at this level. So right now, everything we're discussing is sort of at this level.
Yeah,
but the
it's articulated.
Sort of, the unspoken piece is all the rest of the pieces that sort of put that all together that we don't really talk about.
Well, that we don't really understand. It's like, imagine, I think of it this way, is there's a domain that you could consider known, explored, and that domain technically is where, when you do something, you get the outcome you want. That's really the technical definition of it. And that's a definition of a kind of knowledge. It's practical knowledge, right? I know what I'm doing if, when I do it, what I predict, what I want to have happen, happens.
Right.
And then I can feel comfortable there because I've mastered the situation and I'm not in danger. So that's one domain of reality. And another domain is the unknown. And the unknown is, symbolically, it's often nature as opposed to culture, say, but it's more complex than that, because the unknown can manifest itself at any moment when you act in a certain way and you desire an outcome and that outcome doesn't happen. Then the unknown manifests itself. And the unknown is, you could call it transcendent in some sense, because it's beyond what we know, obviously, and it's also unbelievably complicated. And we have one part of our nervous system, so to speak, that deals with the realm of the known, and the other part of our nervous system, mostly, that deals with negative emotion, deals with the unknown, and it's negative emotion and fantasy. So you might say, well, there's the known world, then there's the unknown world, but there's a bridge between the two, and that bridge is the dream or mythology. It's something like that, is metaphor. That's another way of thinking about it. And it's sort of half known and half unknown. It's this amorphous bridging point. And our knowledge structures, our articulated knowledge structures, are embedded in that dream. So here's an example. Western democracies are predicated on the idea that individuals have an intrinsic value, essentially intrinsic value before God, because it's an equal value. Everyone's equal before the law. Even though we're very unequal as beings, we have this mythological idea, essentially. It's not rational precisely, it's more like an axiomatic assumption. It's something like that there's something intrinsically valuable about each person. And it isn't something you can prove. It's something you have to assume and then go from there. Now, the reason we assume that is very complicated. I think it's not arbitrary. So one of the things I was trying to figure out in this book called Maps of Meaning was, there was this huge fight going on between the Marxists, the communists, and the Western world. And one way of thinking about that is that it's a clash of opinions. It's just a matter of opinion. So I was trying to find out if there was something at the base of Western culture that might be considered more than mere opinion, more than mere rational opinion, grounded, say, well, what I think is grounded in this dreamlike process, but then grounded in biology, grounded in the body, grounded in evolutionary psychology, grounded in our entire biological past. And so I've been trying to make a case for the evolutionary psychology of religious propositions. That's one way of thinking about it.
So this bridge that you're talking about between these two worlds, how much of that bridge is really just the biggest existential questions that there are?
Well, it is that, because one of the things I've noticed as a clinical psychologist too, when you deal with really serious issues, say issues of good and evil, and you might think, well, do you deal with issues of good and evil as a clinical psychologist? And the answer to that is, in serious cases, almost inevitably, so with post-traumatic stress disorder, for example, if it's a soldier who's experienced it, or for that matter, a civilian, it's not often so much because of what happened to them, although that can happen. It's because of what they did. They see them doing something, say on the battlefield or in normal life, that they cannot believe they did. It's so far outside of their self-concept. It opens them up to a different dimension of reality, and I would say that dimension is the dimension of evil.
Yeah. Meaning that they killed someone, or that they made a mistake, or so that they're basically sort of turning it on themselves, and that's
maybe they killed someone in a particularly brutal manner and enjoyed it, for example, you know, or maybe they went into My Lai, you know, you remember in Vietnam where they shot up the entire village. I mean, you don't know what you'd be like on a battlefield, but you wouldn't be like you are sitting here, right? You'd be a different thing. You'd be a different creature. Yeah. And I mean, one example is that, you know, men often rape in battle. But sex is very seldom a public display, although it can be in battle. Well, to my way of thinking, that means there's a whole different neural circuit involved under those conditions. It's much more brutal. And you know, you have a self-concept. Imagine that you're like a mid-American guy, you know, a young kid, basically. You get shipped off somewhere and do something absolutely barbaric. How do you fit that into your conception of the world? One of the things you do with people who have post-traumatic stress disorder is guide them to find a philosophy of good and evil, because otherwise they can't orient themselves again in the world. Yeah. So they have to become more sophisticated, and really they have to become more metaphysically sophisticated. And it's very common, in my experience, for an encounter with malevolence. And so I would describe malevolence as the desire to hurt for the sake of the hurt, right? As an art, really. And it's often an encounter with malevolence that breaks people. I had a client at one point, I'll say she was in college. She was bullied very badly by two kids that were out to get her. And she was so unable to cope with conceptualizing what they were doing, because it was, one of them had asked her out and she decided no, and he decided he would make her life miserable. And she was a naive girl, which matters, right? Because you're more likely to get post-traumatic stress disorder if you're naive. And the malevolence that the two displayed tossed her into a psychotic break. And that's not so uncommon. So when you talk about serious things in psychotherapy, you end up speaking what's essentially a religious language.
See, that's really interesting. And can we appreciate that he's telling stories, anonymously of course, from his clients in his clinical practice. This isn't some theoretical hypothesizing. These are patterns he's seen from people on the ground. This isn't just thinking. This is like practical, you could call it empirical information and stories that he knows. They're anecdotes. When you see enough, it becomes not just an anecdote. You extract the information from that. So let's keep going.
Language of the war between good and evil. It's a huge part of it.
I guess that's it. All right. Thank you, everyone. Please click like and subscribe below, and I'm coming back with more Jordan B. Peterson just for you. Thank you very much.